Hey everyone, welcome to Two Guys Making Tribe, where Gen X meets Gen Y. Enjoy the show. Welcome everybody to the very first episode of Two Guys Making Tribe. Um, Today is March 17th, 2025. We've been playing this for a good year and a half now, but now we finally have launched. And today we're going to start with an intro video, and we're going to talk a little bit about making tribe and how we got started and some of the things that we have going on. So let me introduce you, my co-host, Brendan. Say hi, Brendan.
Hey.
All right. So I'm really glad that we can be here. This came a little bit sooner than we were planning on, but for special reasons. We were going to record on Wednesday night. But unfortunately, there was a lot of tornado activity in the Mississippi area. And Brendan got his orders from Grindstone Ministries to deploy to go help out. For those of you that don't know, Grindstone is a nonprofit organization that deploys people and resources to disaster recovery areas. And Brendan's been volunteering with them for how long, Brendan?
4 or 5 years now.
Yeah. So it's always sad to see Brendan have to deploy, but it's always good to see him and the other people at Grindstone are able to help out. We'll touch on that a little bit more later on, but I wanted to start out with how me and Brendan met. And I guess, was it 2022 maybe? Was it that far back?
I think it was earlier than that. I think it was 21.
Yeah, it might have been. Yeah, it might have been fall of 2021.
Yeah.
So back in the early days of me connecting with people and trying to make tribe, I was able to connect with Brendan, and then we did was it lunch with maybe 4 or 5 people, and we met at a Portillo's here in the Tampa Bay area, and man, we must have spent like 4 hours just shooting the breeze, eating food and dessert and stuff like that. So it was a really good time, and the rest is history. So, Brendan, what inspired you to sit there and get out and just start connecting with people?
So, I was always the lone wolf type, as much as you can be with a family. My wife was not into preparedness. She wasn't into meeting people, having tribe, anything of that nature. COVID happens. Some stuff goes on with her and all that craziness. She calls me up. You were right. I told her I knew. I didn't know what she was talking about, but I knew. So at that point, she was bought in on the preparedness. So I was like, all right, cool. We're locking the gates. We lived off the homestead throughout that time frame. Butchered just about every animal we had on the property. That gave us a good baseline. We made it quite a ways. If I recall correctly, we made it like 14 months before we butchered our last cow.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, and that's just working off of our animals in our garden. But it also let me realize, okay, cool, 14 months, but that's now I have nothing. I have nothing stored, no animals left. And by that point, we kind of realized COVID wasn't what we all thought it was in the beginning. I feel like everybody either thought it was a complete nothing burger or everyone thought it was the end of the world.
Yeah.
I erred on the side of caution, and I'm glad I did. But at that point, I realized, okay, I need to store more. I need to stock more. I need to up my game on the personal level, but also I need people because it wasn't the zombie hordes breaking down the door. But if it was, I had no one to help secure the family. One man cannot provide sufficient security for himself. So I was just scouring the internet, looking to find whatever I could, and I found a Bear Independent video on rice and beans, putting up rice and beans, and I was like, all right, I'm gonna start doing that. And then I found out he had a chat group on his website. He doesn't anymore, but he used to. And I was going through seeing if I could find anybody in the area. Didn't find anybody, and then I remember I put out a thing asking about medical training. If anybody knew any medical training, and you responded, you were the only one who responded with anything useful. And it was funny to me because out of all the people I tried to communicate with, it seemed everybody only wanted to communicate on an internet level. And you were the only one who wanted to actually like meet in person and do training and figure things out. I was like, all right, so that's challenge number one. You know, finding people is easy. Finding useful people, not so much.
Yeah.
So that's how that came about.
Well, you know, COVID was a wake-up call for a whole swath of people. Same thing for me. I mean, up until that point, I mean, I've been preparing, you know, for several years and stuff, mostly hurricane preparedness. But it was just before COVID. So it was like the fall of 2019. I was really looking to get involved with like some like CERT. That's like community emergency response team, usually through at the county level or the fire department or something. Because I wanted to be able to help my community. That's really the big thing, and meet some people. It was very challenging to find a program in the area. So I'm like, you know what? And I didn't want to be involved with the militia or any kind of crazy compound kind of, you know, organization. And that's another discussion for another day. So I just said to myself, you know what? If I can't find what I want, then I just need to create it, to build it. And lo and behold, Bear Independent was where I went first. Because they had that great, you know, internet website where you can sit there like a forum sort of. And I was trying to figure out, you know, how can I sit there and, you know, connect with people? And then you see, hey, I'm in Fort Lauderdale, or I'm in Jacksonville, you know, hit me up if I'm looking for like-minded people, all these like stereotypical, you know, preparedness people sayings and stuff. But nobody was really doing anything to organize anybody or connect. And I'm like, well, how can I find these people? So there was a search function on there, and I searched Florida and found everyone I could find in Florida, okay, and just messaged them and said, hey, I'm looking to connect with people, yada, yada. Are you interested? If you are, I'm willing to make the connections and organize a little meetup or something. And, you know, I got some good responses, but man, they just wanted to chit chat for the most part, just like you were saying. They want to do internet stuff. And plus we were locked down at that point. So I had a couple of months to, technical difficulty. I had a couple of months to figure it out and get people motivated. And by May of 2020, as soon as they opened up like the parks, county parks, boom, we were out. We were doing hikes. We were meeting at Portillo's. This is prior to meeting you, and just meeting all kinds of different people. By the time I got to meet you, that was like 2.0, 2.5 version of networking with people, you know, applying the lessons that I learned and kind of refining what I wanted to find in people, you know, because originally it was like, well, who can I connect with? And then he had the checklist. I need a medical person. I need a security person. I need this kind of person. And then I realized that it's like, you know what? I just need to find people that are willing to sit there and help each other, whether it's building a deck in their backyard, you know, clearing, you know, just like clearing out something to help them build something, or just to go and have a picnic somewhere and get to know each other and do a hike or whatever. So one of the great things that I liked about meeting with you is that you love to do all these outdoor things. So it wasn't hard to sit there and say, "Hey, Brendan, let's go do a hike and we'll do some trainings." Okay, boom, I'm there. And all it takes is two people to make tribe. Set the example for everybody else. Um, another thing that what was really special about doing hikes with you, you're into all the native plants and stuff like that, and medicinal herbs. To a certain extent. So it makes a hike even more interesting when you can sit there and say, "Hey, that's was it Buddhaberry? Buddhaberry? Is that how you say
Beauty
it?
berry, American beauty berry.
American Beautyberry." And that was very popular. Everybody was always amazed when we did hikes for that stuff. And then we got to experiment with different activities to provide a little mentoring slash training and mix it with the hike. So um, I remember this one time when we went to Flatwoods, um, the one that had that big paved trail that
Mhm.
led to the big trail, and we were doing tourniquets and splints. And I remember we hiked in 2 miles, and we got at the water station bench rest area before the 7 mile loop start, and we're all sitting there training each other how to apply tourniquets. And there's like groups of people just looking at us. Some were like, "Oh, wow, that's interesting." Some were like, "What the heck are they doing?" You know. But yeah, that's kind of some of the things that I liked about what we were doing. Now, what have you seen us do um, that we've evolved that you've liked from the beginning to present day?
I think everything grows, right?
Yeah.
And everything evolves over time. So you're talking like by the time I come around, it was 2.0 or 2.5. Well, shoot, you and I have been through 4 iterations of groups
Yeah.
since you and I have,
Yeah.
been hanging out. Um, in the beginning, I noticed it was more. We would do those things like we would go on hikes fairly regularly. I think there for a while we were going almost once a month,
Yeah.
and then we would do an activity with the hike to where now we've gotten, thankfully large enough as a group that we've pretty much got to schedule an entire day for one activity. We don't tend to do multiple
Yeah.
activities at once, or if we do, it's because it's either tied to another event or we've got a bunch of new people in
Mhm.
or something, like that. I've really been enjoying the events up at the farm, over at Devo's place and
Yeah.
doing okay, let's spend a day on medical and have 4 different stations set up, having Van teach IVs.
Mhm.
He's taught my 13-year-old daughter how to set IVs to the point to where we went to a medical convention and she was, setting IVs in a dummy arm where there was a
Yeah.
surgical tech there laughing, saying that she was better than him.
Yeah.
Because she goes to all these events with me. And then we had everything there from, you know, trauma medicine, like tourniquets and wound packing, all the way to casualty care. We had guys doing crash out bags. We had guys doing, IV setting and phlebotomy. We had guys like, how do you dress a wound?
Mhm.
I feel like there's a huge focused on tourniquets and wound packing, which super important. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, that's cool. Now it's 3 days later and he's infected. What do you do? You know,
Yeah.
that was one thing that me and Van were talking about is Van is, he's been working in a hospital for a couple of decades now. And he's talking about he had never used a tourniquet in the field, never needed to because
Mhm.
the bleeding stopped by the time they get to him, or at least managed in some way.
Yeah.
So he's a wealth of knowledge on the aftercare, on the okay, the immediate threat is handled. How do we continue from here? A major injury that could be a 9-month process. everyone thinks about the first, 60 minutes, that golden hour, but it's a process. And that's true with everything, so
Yeah.
like when we do our food storage meetups, everyone wants to put rice and beans up. Yes, rice and beans, very important, big calories, that'll last 30 years. Awesome. What about meat? There's not a whole lot of options for storing meat. There's not a whole lot of cheap options for storing meat
Yeah.
30 years, and then we do events, like we've done on my homestead where we'll butcher a cow, and to watch that evolve. You and I were talking earlier about, the first time I butchered a cow, it was me and one buddy. It took us 10 hours.
Yeah.
We just hacked away, and the last cow we butchered here, I think it was 4 hours. We had pressure canned 100 pounds. We had the rest of it chopped up into beautiful cuts. I've got 2 deep freezers full. I sent everybody home with a bunch of meat, either canned or, however they wanted it. And it was, you learn over time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Everything we do has progressed, I feel, for the better. I don't think we've backstepped on anything.
No. I mean, there's always, the network has decent number of people in it, and there's the core amount, just like any group or organization, or whatever the case may be, where there's a small amount of people that do a lot of the stuff. It's not like in the corporate world where they're doing the work, but there's a core amount of us that are really doing all the participating. We just got to hope that we still can find a way to motivate some of these people to kind of step up and take advantage or utilize the opportunities. But doing that stuff like at your house, when I just had a meetup yesterday, it got brought up. How much people learn from that, and it helps you out in the sense of process and animal. It helps out the people to get the experience from doing it, and then they got a little takeaway for it. I think it's very important for all of us to experience culling some kind of animal, in some way. I remember, it's probably 2 years ago now. Went up to Joe's and he was culling his rabbits. Watched him do it. He was, showing me how to do it. I'd help out with little parts, and then I did one myself. The only time in my life that I've ever, killed an animal. But I think it's important for us to do those kind of things to be able to appreciate where our food comes from.
Yeah. And it's crazy that so some of the people who I've had around who have never culled an animal or never even seen the process or had anything to do with the process, the 2 biggest things that I always find funny at the takeaway is they're weirded out by how quickly it goes from this is a cute animal to it's meat. We did the quails the other day, and quail's super simple. Pop the head off, pinch the breast, skin peels off like a sock, and I had my son-in-law with me, and I did one real quick just to show him, and he was like blown away that, wow, that's meat now. It was a bird a second ago, now it's meat. And he said the same thing when he did the cow. Another thing that I always hear is people don't realize the weight difference for some reason. It typically with larger animals, but I've heard it in reference to chickens too. You get a 10-pound chicken, you don't get 10 pounds of chicken. You get 2 or 3 pounds of chicken.
Right. The rest is bones and skin and
right. And the amount of awful, I don't want to say waste because nothing's waste. Chickens will eat anything. But as far as like the cow guts and whatnot go, whatever organ meats we don't eat. But like our last bull, I want to say he was 750 or 800 pounds in that ballpark. We got 400 pounds of meat off him, which is a kind of a good haul. That's on the better percentage wise, 30 to 50% is a really nice percentage. But
Yeah.
again, you're cutting off legs and you're dragging away a 120-pound leg. And by the time you debone it and after everything, you don't end up with 120 pounds of meat, you know? But
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, it reminds me of when we were doing a canning session at my house, and you brought over the pig portions, and we're trying to debone this thing. I didn't have the right set of knives. It just was not the space for it, you know? And I had no experience, you know, and it's kind of funny because a lot of my uncles were meat cutters. So I kind of wish I had the opportunity when I was younger to go. And this is when you'd get a big slab of beef that comes to the store and they'd break it down there. Now everything's done at the warehouse and brought prepackaged and what have you. But it can be challenging without the experience and the right tools and stuff like that. And I mean, just imagine how much that cow wasn't your first animal, but just imagine how your skills have increased from the first cow to the last cow.
Oh, even simple things like, you know, deer and sheep and goats, you know. When we first started homesteading, if I wanted to butcher an animal, it was an all-day process from, you know, dispatching him to finished cleaning up. I would set an entire day aside. Last time I did a goat, Ishmael came over with a couple of goats. We did 2 goats in I think 30 minutes. You know? I mean, not including cleanup, but like from dispatching them to starting to clean up was maybe 30, 40 minutes. You know, and that's, you know, not just quartering them, that's packaged up, ready to go. And I think we had his son manning the grill at that point. I think we threw some ribs on the grill too while we were cleaning them.
Yeah.
So, you know, yeah, definitely gotten quicker over time and a lot less waste. I've noticed that's been the biggest improvement for me. Yeah, going from that first cow where I essentially I took him like I took a deer, you know, which I've been hunting most of my life. So wild game versus farm raised animals are a little different. You got way more meat on a farm raised animal. You also have the luxury with a farm raised animal. You're not packing it out. So with a deer, you know, you have to carry this animal out. You know, if I hike 2 miles in, shoot a deer, and I want to make it in one trip, I'm quartering them up as quick as I can, you know, doing things like that. Now, whitetail, they're pretty easy. You can pretty much turn them into a backpack, but
yeah,
even then, so like with ribs, I've never taken ribs off a deer. You just cut the meat out from in between and go. There's not a whole lot of meat on deer ribs. On a cow, that's a lot of meat.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of meat to go to waste, especially if you're trying to skin bones off of a cow. Or like you and I talked, you asked me the first time if I made tallow out of them. Didn't even think about it. You know, it just did not cross my mind. I was so concerned about getting the meat. That was a resource that went to waste. I got some buddies who they're marrow hunters, you know, not specifically for marrow, but they take the femurs and all that to make marrow, or rather eat the marrow. Something I never used to do, never done it with deer. I've done it now with cows. It's ended up more as a resource for the dog. The dog loves it more than anybody. So but I've made a point to, you know, that is a resource I don't want to waste. So I boil up the legs, throw it to the dog. You know,
kind of harkens back to the Native Americans where nothing went to waste. You know, on the buffalo or, you know, whatever they were hunting out then. I think it's always good for us to learn some of those ways. You know, we're so used to just going to a Publix or a Winn-Dixie and grab some shrink wrapped meat and stuff, and just wondering what they did with all the other parts. I'm sure they didn't throw them out.
Yeah, it's crazy. So I read a lot of the old like mountain men memoirs and stuff like that. And, you know, cuts that you've never heard of, or uses for parts of the animal you never would think. So stuff like horns, there's nothing I can do for horns other than they look pretty. But they'd
Yeah.
make bowls and cups and spoons out of them, and combs and all that. I read one, they were talking about a substance called Depulier, which I have scoured the internet. I cannot find anything on this other than in this book. But apparently it was a bread substitute that they would
Really?
get off the bison. It was the fat along the back strap of the bison. He said it was about a 1/4 inch at the highest point, and it would go down to a feather's edge, about 7 inches long, and they would deep fry it. And when they dried it out and deep fried it, it would last for weeks. And it was a bread substitute by the natives. I want to say he said it was the Paiute he was, traveling with, but I could be wrong on that. By 60 Years on the Plains is the name of the book. But and he said it's better than any bread he had ever had. And that was kind of his his litmus test for if he was trusted. He was like, if you walk into a village or a tribe and they offer you Depulier, you can sleep sound at night. If they don't offer it to you, leave.
Oh God, that's too funny. So since we're chatting about how we met and then how things have evolved, what do you think are some good ways for us to move forward? Obviously we're doing this podcast now, which is a big thing. You've already been involved with Grindstone, and I know we've been emphasizing for the past 6 months, 8 months about helping people locally after the hurricanes and stuff. I know when it came to Milton, well, with Helene, you were up in East Tennessee and North Carolina helping out there. And then by the time Milton came, you had to rush back, get your family, and evacuate them. And then your property suffered a whole bunch of, impact. And I remember, we put out the call to come help out, at your property and stuff. And people came and helped out. So to me, I think that was a good example of where people, if they can't deploy like with Grindstone or the Red Cross or somewhere else, that they help out with a network of people. I know right after Milton, I was bringing solar gear to people that I know, and I was bringing gear to people that I didn't even know, but were friends of people that were in the network and had asked me.
You brought a generator to me because mine ended up underwater.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And so, if we're lucky enough and we have the resources and we don't get impacted as much, then we should be willing to sit there and help other people, and I think the best way to do that is to lead by example, But I found it interesting that Grindstone evolved to where instead of just doing the full-fledged deployments, they started doing the mini deployments. Now, was the Brooksville one the first mini deployment, or?
Did you lose me?
You got your back now.
Okay. Yes, correct. The Brooksville was the first mini deployment. So they started something called Project Endure, which is pretty much what you and I have been doing for the last few years. They're encouraging people who are familiar with Grindstone and who have been on Grindstone deployments to take that information back to their community, set up their community response, and that way it lessens the burden on Grindstone if they have to come out, but B, strengthens the community. The mini deployments are, rather than send out a call for 150, 200 people to come through, everybody dump a bunch of money. Hey, if you're local, if you're within the state, if you're wherever, go here, help out. And then they will usually send a couple people from Grindstone as a representative rather than 24 guys like they normally do.
Right.
But yeah, so Project Endure has pretty much been encouraging people who have been with Grindstone on deployments to encourage them to make their mini Grindstone, if you will, in their local area.
Yeah.
And it's also
And-
evolved since, not to cut you off, but
Yeah.
it's also evolved since I've been working with them. In the beginning, it was, we'd find one or two people affected, and we did start to finish everything. It was, we'd cut trees off their property, we'd demo the house for them for free, we helped rebuild the house, and it's gotten so large and stretched so out to where now it's less on the there's a term for it and I can't remember it. You have disaster relief, disaster recovery, and then something else, pretty much the rebuilding of it. We've focused less on the rebuilding, not to say we don't still do that. That's still in their purview. But we're at the point to where it's spread out so massive, like with Helene, I want to say they were out there like 45, 48 days. I couldn't even begin to tell you how many target properties we worked on. In the 10 days I was up there, I know I stepped foot on a different property every day, some days 3 or 4 properties, yeah, they've just gotten so big. Their purview has changed so much.
Yeah, like anything else, I mean, that the more you're doing it, the more efficiencies that you come across, and you just have to evolve, because what you thought was, hey, this was the focus, but now we can do these other things, not only do things better, but do different things. One of the things that was so devastating about Helene and Milton was all the tree debris and the impacts that it made. There's a neighborhood off of Del Mabry in the Tampa area where almost the entire subdivision was flooded out. And I'm not saying to the point where it was in their houses, but literally up to their stoops. I mean, people were literally parking their cars on the main entrance road right off of Del Mabry and either walking in muck boots or leaving a canoe or a kayak where their car would be parked when they went to work.
I canoed them out the front door for the first week.
Yeah. And when I went in there, I mean, luckily I got a truck and I was able to plow through it, but there was cars that were getting stuck. And I was asking, because I have a lot of people I know in there, and I was like, what happened? Why is this even flooded out? There's some kind of water control device. I say device, it's some kind of massive mechanism somewhere, just north or, somewhere near the property that trees fell and inhibited it from doing whatever it was to do to control the water. And that's why all the water went into the community. And because there's so much devastation, whoever is responsible for going in to pull it out, or fix it, they weren't coming out for a while. So people that lived there either had chainsaws or knew people with chainsaws, and they went and they took care of it themselves. I mean, it took probably a good 10 days, 2 weeks for that place to drain out. This is on top of, and I probably had not seen, out of all the areas that I drove in Tampa from Thursday morning, right after the storm, to like Tuesday, that following Tuesday, the most density and vast amounts of tree damage was in that community on top of the flooding. I mean, just those old, massive, oak trees. I mean, just some people had stuff on their house, across their driveways, across the streets. I mean, it was insane. It's just one of so many examples of what probably happened up in North Carolina, East Tennessee, outside of the river flooding. The flooding was much more massive up there. Here, it was very sporadic, just in certain places. But yeah, so so let me segue over to like the mini deployment. So when you did the one in Brooksville, okay, um, did you see a lot of interest and participation from people? I mean, from non grindstone that you know answered the call, so to speak.
So, all right, when you do grindstone deployments, typically you're going to see the same faces. Now, I'm not saying it's only the same faces. Every deployment, we'd have between, I think a light day might be 20 people. I think the most I've ever seen was like 70 people come through in a day. I know there's been more than that. Because not everybody's staying for the same length of time either,
Right.
But there's a couple of us that make more than a couple of us that make it a habit to go to most, if not all. So I have every deployment I go to, there's at least half a dozen to 10 guys that I know personally now because of going through the grindstone deployments, major and mini deployments. So like with the Brooksville mini deployment, there were 1, 2, 3. Yeah, 3 guys who I have been on deployment somewhere else in the country with. The one here at my property, we had a dozen people show up, and out of that dozen, I knew, or at least have met everybody but one person. A handful of them came from out of state, and more than a couple of them I had been on other grindstone deployments with. So it's you're always going to have your similar faces who answer the call, but everyone I've done, we have had brand new faces, which is a cool thing. Now with the mini deployments, most of them have been local. That being said, we had a guy drive down from North Carolina for the Brooksville one. I had 3 people here for the one at my place from Tennessee, all separate of each other. They didn't ride down together, they individually drove. Now I'd been on deployment with 2 of them before, and then out of that, the rest of them, there was one Florida guy out Orlando way, which I actually met at one of our meetups. And then 2 from Oklahoma, who I had been on deployments with, both of them. And then the rest were our people. So there's definitely been interest.
Yeah, I know I was going to try to do that Brooksville one, but I couldn't make that one work out. But excuse me, but doing the one at your property was a nice segue into doing it. Okay. Though the conditions there, that was crazy town.
That was
definitely
fun.
Muck boots are definitely on my to get list. But I'm sure that is an extreme versus. Well, I guess you know what. Let me not make assumptions because I haven't deployed to any of the disaster areas. So when you guys were up doing Helene, was it really saturated water wise? I mean, did you have to do your work in the water?
It depends where you're at. So we were in some locations where, so my first day out for the Helene deployment, we went to a driveway. The driveway is 300 yards in. The gentleman had come to peace with the fact that he would never see his house again, and he's just going to have to sell the property because it was a 300-yard driveway, which was a very steep valley, and it was over 100 trees between 12 and 20 inches.
Wow.
Down across his driveway. Um, one of the guys, I don't know if he wants his name on the internet, but has a picture of me 18 foot in the air standing on a down oak tree as I'm cutting oak trees over my head. And that's how it was. You've got 5 trees layered on top of each other every 20 feet all the way up this 300-yard driveway. Now you get 5 of us and a mini X out there. We had him at his house in 6 hours from when we showed up.
Wow.
He was in tears when he pulled up. And you get that, you get that where people see this devastation, and you can never, like, talking with somebody who just lost their house, the first one I went on, Mayfield, Kentucky. This gentleman, the only thing that was left of his house was 2 I-beams. That was all that was left. And you're talking with the guy, and you can't give him his house back, but you can relieve the burden because he had a 7-acre plot that he raised horses on. Lost all his horses, lost all his horse trailer. We got his horse trailer a half mile away out of a cedar tree.
Wow.
But we can clean up the debris so he doesn't have to worry about it. We can remove all the brush so he doesn't have to worry about it. On that one, we had like 60 guys on his property working for 3 straight days. We had him enough firewood cut and split. 2 guys, that was just their whole thing. They spent the 3 days just splitting firewood for this guy, just to give him some relief, we do everything we can, So the difference with the mini deployments, I feel, the mini deployments are a beautiful look into how we target on a large deployment. So a full-scale deployment is essentially 1 crew on a mini deployment, or rather it's 1 crew's worth. So if we're on a full-blown deployment, we'll set off, 4 to 6 crews to go out, SAW teams or whichever. And then you always have your guys, you've got a logistics team back at the FOB trying to deal with incoming and outgoing and whatnot. So those teams will ride around, find properties to work on. Once we've established, okay, this is a property we want to work on. This is someone who we can really help, because that's another thing with Grindstone. You have to have some discernment. Do we want to help everybody? Absolutely. The guy with 1 oak tree down in his front yard isn't as high on the priority list as the single mother who has an oak tree down through her house.
Yeah.
So we want to help that guy, but he might get pushed to the back end compared to the woman with the tree on her house. So once we find, this property, we identify, okay, what can be our scope of work here? How can we help in whatever way we can help? How many guys do we need on this? What do we have to put into it logistically? All right, we've got that planned. Go. That's another beautiful thing about Grindstone that I love, to show like a little bit of the inner workings. I don't know how many freaking meetings the leadership does. I know every morning, just on my level, I'm not a first-time volunteer, but I'm by no means in a leadership role. I have helped run crews, but I'm not in a leadership capacity. And I would go through 3 meetings a day. So I know, like Kyle, the operations director, he's got to be doing a dozen meetings a day between everybody involved, And I know he works a lot with like county and state. And there was one night during Helene, I think he went to a state meeting, a federal meeting, and like 2 county meetings back to back to back. He didn't get back to the FOB till like 3 a.m. Very, very organized in their approach. And I love that. But back to my point, the mini deployments are essentially one property out of a large deployment. So to look at a large deployment, take the mini deployments, imagine 3 of those going on at once, and then dozens of those throughout the 2 to 4 weeks we're typically there.
Yeah. We know one of the things, I got quite a few things out of the experience of doing the mini deployment. It gave me an intro to what a small segment of what it would be like to be on a full-blown deployment. Excuse me. But it also gave me the opportunity to interact with the people that came down from Grindstone and people that volunteer in whatever capacities, and, Jason's high energy. I was totally impressed with him. I could see why he's in the position that he is. And it was good balance because he was able to interact on different levels of personality.
Mm-hmm.
So I think being that I did CERT training last year and got some exposure to some of the people that run like the Mercy Operations Center and what have you. Okay. I think Jason would be capable of interacting in that environment and discerning the difference between, hey, I got to operate at this level and have this certain kind of interaction with people, and then have a slightly different one for being with the guys, hanging out at the deployment.
I love Jason. He is one of my best friends. Jason is one of the few human beings who I've ever met who can be an effective leader and an effective follower at the same time. It's very rare you get both. Some people are great at leading. They cannot take direction for crap. Some people are great followers. Hey, point me in the direction, tell me what to do, and I'll do it. They fall apart when they lead. Jason can adequately fit both roles at the drop of a hat. And that working with him has just been absolutely amazing.
Yeah, it was so funny seeing that little dog
Disaster
in the backhoe with him. I had to do a double take. I'm like, what? But it was great. And, the guy that I shadowed, the days that I was there, I was picking his brain left and right, trying to understand the art and the science to, chainsaw techniques, figuring out how do you, fell a tree properly and, what's a natural way where it's going to go and how much extent you can manipulate that tree and when you just can't. And then we had some conversation, him and I, about logistics because I already knew there's a lot of logistics involved in it and in deployments and disaster relief outside of the chainsaw stuff. And it's like, Bear and PJ would say, everyone wants to do the sexy stuff, go chop down some trees or whatever. But 95% of the stuff that has to be done is all the logistics around everything else. It's not all the fun, sexy stuff of going dropping trees or, what have you. So that was good having conversations with that.
Yeah. So he actually went to college for that.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
He's got a legit degree in the logistics aspect of it. And
yeah, he was telling me a story about, I don't know if Bear knew that already about his degree, but he got voluntold to go handle a certain situation.
Yeah, so he and I were talking over Helene about that. He loves doing saw crew stuff. That's his jam.
Yeah.
He got voluntold on that Mayfield deployment. He and I met on the Mayfield deployment. It was both of our first. Got voluntold, which he was cool with because he was nursing a shoulder injury, I think it was. And when they realized how good it was, he just became the logistics guy for like 9 deployments. And then of Helene, he was like, guys, no, I'm doing chainsaw stuff.
No good deed goes unpunished, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but you know, all the people there were different characters, and it was great seeing those guys operate that machinery. I mean, it was just amazing all around. I totally recommend anyone that has an opportunity to deploy with Grindstone or some organization to do it. And even if you're, I like to say that I was his body man, just following him around carrying chainsaws and wedges and axes and fuel and stuff. That was fine because I was able to learn so much from him. For some people, they just want to get into, well, how do I chainsaw and let me do it. I'm a different kind of learner.
It blows my mind how many people, if we're not doing the sexy stuff, we don't want to do it. This has happened to some degree on every deployment, but the most egregious one, in my opinion, during Helene, we had a couple of guys who showed up with a heavy equipment, a skid steer and a mini X. And there's like, all right, we're going out, we're doing trees. And it's like, well, no, we've already got everything planned out. So for tomorrow, if you could stay around and help move pallets of water, you'd be very useful there. They packed up and they left. They said, if we can't go do the sexy stuff on camera, we don't want to do it.
Oh,
and they had come from states away, you know, and it's like, it blows my mind that, hey, look, moving the pallets of water for the little old lady is just as valuable as cutting down the tree. You know, sure, it might not be exactly where you want to be, but it's still helping. And if you're there for the right reason, if you're there because it is put on your heart, you have the conviction to help your fellow man and woman, it doesn't matter what you're doing.
Yeah.
You know, I have working with Grindstone, I have done everything from cutting trees to washing dishes, you know, getting put on dish duty when you are cooking for 1,000 first responders. So in Mayfield, that was our thing, is they were making our first priority there was feeding first responders. So the first day I was there, I think we fed 600. The second day was 900. And the third day was like 1,100, you know, and everything from making spaghetti and, you know, these giant 10-gallon steel pots, you know, to spending 2 hours cleaning dishes and seasoning cast iron, because that's how we're cooking all our ground beef, on propane burners and cast iron.
Yeah.
So everything from cutting trees, rebuilding houses, to washing dishes, every last bit is valuable. You know, not everybody gets to run out and go on saw crews. You know, if we've got 70 people on the ground, maybe a dozen go out on a saw crew, you know?
Yeah. Well, you know, it kind of reinforces things I try to explain to people, whether it's at meetups or just conversations, you know, or even making comments online, that, you know, everyone has a value in the sense that there are so many things to do that all the non-sexy stuff, a lot of people might, you know, you got your little old ladies or, you know, just elderly people or someone that just is not mechanically inclined, just want to be their help. And hey, you know what? Go organize these things. This is where the leadership comes in and organizational skills, to be able to direct all these people. So, I mean, it just kind of goes with what you said about those guys that came and they couldn't do the things they wanted to do, and so they left. You know, so finding opportunities for people to do something and being able to explain it to them that it has a value, you know, can go a long way. Especially if you're dealing with the local populations. Who was that? I don't know if I was talking with somebody or if it was something from a news conference that had to deal with North Carolina. Because it's the whole Helene, I mean, the whole North Carolina, East Tennessee thing, the most amazing thing that I seen was how much the community came together, even the people that were just devastated. It set the right example with people. And it's a common thing. The normies, they see it. I mean, I've had conversations with customer service reps for one thing or another, and they're based out of North Carolina. And as soon as I know that, I'm like, hey, how y'all doing up there? Have you personally been able to recover and what have you? And um, they all have the same sentiment in the sense that they were impressed. And these are people that are not in our genre.
So let me give you a quick little story. The guy you were shadowing when you were here, he's local to Tennessee. So we actually set our fob up in his hometown. He worked for 45 days every single day while we were up there. And what never uttered a word, never complained, never anything. And it wasn't until the last week that it comes out. Oh, yeah, he's got 200 trees down on his property.
Wow.
But day one, he was out helping everybody else and continued to do so for 5 weeks. You know, the level of selflessness, you know, is commendable.
Yeah.
And I saw that all through Tennessee. Everybody, you know, there were accidents. There was an accident on a switchback road where we're backed up for miles and people are blowing past us asking, hey, do you know what's going on? No, don't know. Okay, I'm going to go up there and clear the way for first responders or guys with four-wheelers who could get around, four-wheelers and side-by-sides blowing by because they can get around the traffic and cut through the woods to clear a path for first responders, to direct traffic. There had to have been 6 or 7, you know, just local guys helping out, you know, guys with a tractor bulldozing new roads for people just because county either couldn't get out there or they were so overwhelmed. You know, the amount of community. I see why they call it the volunteer state. You know, it's like everybody, everybody, and everybody did it with a smile on their face. You know, every single person was amazing to interact with up there.
Yeah, it sounds like some great stuff. You know, when I was at that little mini meetup yesterday, one of the things that I was impressed with was there was 2 people there, okay, that never met each other. We know one of them, okay, and another person was someone I just met. And they both went out of their way to volunteer their assistance in anything, even the stuff that they do for a business, okay, to help out. Now, my expectation, you know, we already do that kind of stuff. We all share our expertise, you know, mentoring and stuff like that. But sometimes, you know, you just got to be careful it's like if you have your own business, you don't want to be doing everything for free per se when, you know, you should be getting paid for it in a sense. Now, I know you've, you know, done some work for some of the people in the group and stuff like that. But nobody had the expectation, hey, Brendan, come and do this for free.
Right.
You know, it's different than you're not in the chainsaw, you know, of tree business. But if someone needed help taking down a tree, then it's like, oh, okay, I'll come help you out.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Or hey, let's go call your cow, you know. But one of the conversations that kind of was a sidebar is one of the people at the he came to our disaster recovery meetup. He was one of the 2 guys from the Orlando area, and he's been working on rain catchment. So the conversation kind of shifted over there, and lo and behold, we're talking about gutters, and I had no idea. Our buddy AB, okay, the one that helped you put the tarp on the roof, at your dad's, he's in the gutter business.
Yeah.
He was wearing a T-shirt that said "The Gutter Man" or something.
Yeah.
And I was like, I had no, I knew he did his own thing, but it never, came up in conversation about what he does. I don't generally ask that kind of stuff. If we end up talking about it, it segues out, then it's one thing. But I had no idea. And then I was just like, we'll see. And I said to the guy that came from Orlando, I was like, the money you spent on Portillo's today is paid for itself because the Gutter Man is going to help advise you on this problem that you're having with your gutter system and your rain catchment.
It's funny that you mentioned that because so when I do the meetups, the disaster relief meetups or the meetups with our group, I tend to log people in by topics, whatever their particular expertise is. It's like, okay, that guy's knows a lot of medical. He's the medical guy, or this guy, knows a lot on radios, or he's a security guy, or whatever. And it doesn't always correlate to their job, Mm-hmm. So I'm talking with one buddy who, in my mind, he is the radio guy. Like he's got it down. He knows the technology. He's kind of on the cutting edge with it. He knows a bunch of new technology I've never even heard of. I'm by no means a radio guy, but He knows a lot more than me. And we're talking the other day. I am not a mechanic. I am a carpenter. I am not a mechanic. And I mentioned something's wrong. I was like, oh yeah, that'll take me 10 minutes. I was like, oh, you know how to work on trucks? I was like, yeah, I've done it since I was a little kid. And I was like, oh shit. Just never correlated that, oh, you're more than the radio guy. You're more than the medical guy. People wear a lot of different hats.
Yeah, and you see that more often than not. And what's interesting is sometimes you don't get to the point where you understand that until you spent time to interact with them. You're generally not going to learn that by going click, 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 click on the keyboard and, talking whatever you're talking about. It's shooting the breeze, breaking bread, going on a hike. Going back to the hikes that we used to have. I mean, it was probably my most favorite activity because the conversations we would have had so much depth and breadth. Okay, just walking in the woods with a couple of people, and it just you're embracing the scenery, and sometimes people are quiet at first, and you're just having conversation, and people get comfortable, and then you just the conversation just goes, and you could hop from one group to another group within the as people are ebbing and flowing. So and I'm sure you can do that stuff when you're walking around trying to clear debris, because there is one of the things the chainsaw guy, obviously, if you haven't noticed, people, we're not using real names for most people, out of respect, but he had said, one of the first things he said to me, he said, all right, you got a tourniquet, you got your vest, he says, got your radio, and says, understand that there's a lot of waiting around. And I was like, okay. Well, that first day, I didn't have my radio, I didn't have my vest, I had my gloves, I didn't have muck boots, I had my steel toe boots. But you know what? That next day, I had all the proper gear, and so I learned a lot. But the reason I bring that up, it was good that he prefaced the checks, for safety, but also to set the expectation that we're not going to be running around in the woods going wow, left and right like it's a sword, Got to make our way in. We got to see what's going on. We might have to wait for the skid steer to do this and that. And then, okay, how are we going to drop this? All right, everybody cleared out of the way. I mean, it's a whole lot of waiting around, especially if you're not the one actually using the chainsaw, which I wasn't.
If it's a tree that's got some technical cuts, you might spend 20 minutes planning on how to take that tree, where to drop that tree, what's a good back out plan. 2 minutes, if that, to drop it. And then you spend 20 minutes limbing it out, bucking it up, letting the heavy equipment go on. So out of a, almost hour process, 2 minutes of it is
Yeah.
actually cutting the tree.
One thing I learned the hard way. So one of the things I had to do was, as he's limbing the trees as they drop, or cutting stuff around, so he has clear, safe access to the base of the tree to cut it down, I had to pull all the shrubs and the branches out. And some of those things were pretty big.
Mm.
And I'm sitting there trying to pull this stuff out, and there's vines everywhere, and it's muddy, you can't get footing. And I'm pulling things, I'm getting scraped in the neck, in the back of the neck. It's catching on my radio wire. I mean, it's just like, oh my God. I was just like, no, mental note. Okay, don't have loose wires, don't have loose clothing. Don't wear any jewelry or chains.
So I don't know if he was wearing his shoulder mic that day, because I've seen him with shoulder mics and I've seen him without shoulder mics. And he taught me something that I've started to do. When you have your shoulder mic on your radio, to wrap it either around the backside of your body or wrap it opposite across your chest. That way you don't have anything hanging with a loop. Keep it taut for that reason. Yeah. This deployment was actually the first time I've ever seen him wear chainsaw chaps, which turned out to be a good thing in his case.
Yeah, definitely.
Because he says he doesn't like getting caught up. They're kind of, cumbersome, especially if you're walking through an area with a lot of underbrush.
Oh, yeah.
He was very glad he wore them this time. I'll leave that story for another time, but
Oh, yeah.
It is a good thing to wear protective gear.
Oh, yeah. Well, when we pulled out, we were, moving around with the chainsaws, and we had the covers. Now, the covers were generally not on, because a lot of times, I had two chainsaws. He had one and I had the other one. And I was making it a point where the covers are here. So when you're moving, okay, and you take it off to go work the chainsaw. So I put it back on. And I was doing it every time because I'm thinking, well, you put it on there so I don't sit there and just like cut my leg or my hand by handling it, especially because you couldn't really hold your footing. And the one time, okay, that I didn't put it on because I was just going to take like 3 steps, I fell. And luckily, I was able to catch myself and not hit my hands or my face on the chainsaw. So I was being really good about it. And it just made me think that I wonder how many people that either help chainsaw guys or guys that run chainsaws, how often they don't put the covers on.
So
I see the logic on why putting it on, because you can trip on anything, even if it wasn't wet out, because of all the root system and rocks and everything else.
So I'm super particular. If you are not actively cutting a tree, your bar brake is on, your chain brake, so that little lever on the front of the chainsaw locks that chain in place. As soon as I'm done cutting, I pop that lock in place. So it's not just running or spinning. A lot of new guys don't do that. All the professionals I know keep their chain lock on if they're not actively using it. I also make a habit of doing the same thing with the scabbard. Like you said, slide the scabbard on if you're walking one place to another. Sure, it doesn't make sense if we're walking 20 feet, but if you're walking, 20 yards or more, throw the scabbard on. It takes 2 seconds to whip off. And to your credit, the only time I've ever cut myself with a chainsaw, it was not running. I grabbed the bar, being an idiot, on a freshly sharpened chain. The chain lock was on. Guess what? They're made to cut hardwood. I am not as hard as wood.
Yeah.
So, scabbard wasn't on, slipped my hand right across the thing, took a 1-inch chunk right out of my hand.
Oh, that must be the time we were chatting about that.
Yeah, cutting a dang 30-inch hickory with a 16-inch saw. Got it pinched. I got that tree down, though. Hand bandaged up. I'm, 8 foot in the air trying to cut this thing.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, let's see. We are now at an hour and 10 minutes. So I think we will cut this one here. Give you the opportunity to close out with anything. Any other things you want to share or say?
Did you want to talk about the trip I had this weekend, or do we want to push that off for another one?
Let's save that for the next episode.
Sounds good.
Yeah, and then while you're deployed, coming up this week, let's try to maybe do something while you're remote. I don't know how your timing is, if they're working you from dusk to dawn and then you're just crashing out. But if we have opportunity, maybe we'll do a little remote show.
Each one's different. The last couple haven't been. The last couple have actually been pretty nice. We've been sticking pretty good schedules, like 7 to 5. That is the beautiful thing with Grindstone getting bigger and more popular. We've had more people. More people equals not running us to the bone. I know with the Mayfield deployment, I had been up and working, I want to say 73 hours was the hardest time. Now, that wasn't solely on Grindstone. That was me throwing other stuff in at that point. But I had gone 73 hours at one point doing stuff. It's evolved so much to now, like, we can easily do an 8-hour day, accomplish a good amount, and then come back to the fob till like the fob's clean, dinner's cooked, everything's taken care of. So that's
I think that's a good way to operate, because it keeps everybody fresh, because if everyone's weared out, corners start getting cut, mistakes get made, or just people are fatigued and what have you. And, these are, somewhat dangerous situations sometimes. So, but I hope you have a safe ride out to Mississippi, and, are able to help a lot of people out there, and just keep me updated, and, get some more info out to everybody on this.
Absolutely.
All right, everybody. If anyone is interested in helping out in Grindstone, whether it's donating money or time, or participating in, a deployment or mini deployment, please go check out grindstoneministries.com. You'll see information there. There's a link. All the volunteers have to, do application. It's pretty simple. We did it for the mini deployment. It's no problem. It doesn't cost you anything. But they could always use supplies. They generally put out Amazon lists, I think, too, now for various things. But you can find all that information on grindstoneministries.com, or go check out Bear Independent, and you can link out from that place as well. All right. Well, Brendan, you be safe, buddy, and I will talk to you as we'll talk every day this week. So.
Oh, yeah.
All right. You have a great one, man, and we'll see you on the next time.
You as well.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please remember to like and subscribe and share with your friends. We will see you next time.